A ruthless vampire king discovers a fragile, disabled baby vampire in the arms of a kind human waitress, his own abandoned child. Her fearless compassion for the baby forces him to confront his cruelty, shattering centuries of pride and changing the destiny of his kingdom forever. People in the kingdom of Nocturne still talk about the night their cruel king first heard his own child's cry. They say that was the moment the darkness over the land began to change, even if no one saw it yet. The vampire king, Lucian Valerius, rode through the winter mist with the calm of someone who feared nothing and trusted no one. The forest around his black carriage shivered with frost, branches silver under the moon, as if the night itself bowed before him. Inside, he sat motionless, pale hands folded over a blood-red cloak, golden eyes reflecting the passing trees like two quiet flames. To his people he was a legend carved in stone, ruthless, immortal, untouched by mercy. Only Lucian knew how heavy that stone had become. He listened to the horses' hooves thudding over the frozen road, and to the thoughts he never spoke aloud. 500 years of ruling had taught him that kindness was dangerous, that affection could be twisted into a weapon. Long ago, he had cared once, too deeply, too humanly, and the price had been a war and a grave he never dared visit. Since then, he had promised himself that nothing soft would ever survive in his heart again. A sudden snap of a branch cut through the night. The carriage slowed. Lucian's guards tensed on the roof, leather creaking, steel whispering from sheaths. Shadows moved between the trees, nervous and clumsy. Human. Lucian could smell their fear even before he heard the first shaky whisper. "Now," someone hissed, "for the rebellion." Figures rushed from the darkness, cloaked in rags, holding rusted swords and trembling torches. One torch landed near the horses. They reared, shrieking. The carriage jolted. Steel rang. No one dared strike the carriage doors, but they attacked the wheels, the horses, anything that carried the king of monsters. Lucian sighed, more tired than afraid. He stepped out before his guards could stop him, the cold air kissing his face like an old friend. The attackers froze. Under the pale moon, his eyes glowed faintly, not with savage rage, but with a quiet, chilling focus. "Drop your weapons," he said, voice soft enough that they had to lean toward him to hear. A boy barely older than 17 held a shaking blade, his knuckles white. His lips formed the word monster, but no sound came. Lucian saw the hunger in his eyes, the desperation of someone who had watched too many winters steal too many people. The boy lunged. Lucian's guards moved first, but he raised a hand. In one smooth motion, faster than human sight, he caught the boy's wrist before the blade touched him. The torchlight showed the boy's terror clearly now. He expected pain, fangs, death. Lucian looked at him, and for a heartbeat, saw another human face overlaid on his. A woman with dark hair and defiant eyes, the only one who had ever called him by his first name without fear. Isolde. The memory stabbed him before he pushed it away. "Go home," Lucian murmured. He twisted, not hard enough to break, only enough to make the sword fall. The boy gasped and collapsed to his knees. Around them, the other rebels stared, waiting for blood that did not come. "Take their weapons," Lucian told his guards. "No executions, no whips. They are hungry, not evil." One of his captains hesitated. "My king, the law." "Has not seen this winter," Lucian cut in. "I have." For a moment, the forest was silent but for the hiss of their torches and the boy's ragged breathing. Then the rebels turned and ran, stumbling into the dark, leaving their swords in the snow. Lucian watched them go, feeling the familiar pull inside him. The part that still believed mercy was weakness, and the part that refused to forget what it meant to be helpless. As the carriage rolled on toward the human town of Brindleford, his captain glanced at him through the window. "Why visit them yourself, your majesty? You could summon the innkeepers to the castle." Lucian looked back at the moon-washed road. Because people lie less when they think I am not listening, he said. And because I am tired of hearing about humans only through reports. He did not add the other reason. There were nights when the castle was too quiet, its long stone halls echoing with ghosts only he could hear. In the town, there was noise, clumsy and alive. It reminded him that the world still moved, even if he often felt frozen outside of it. Brindleford glowed ahead like a cluster of fireflies, its lanterns swinging in the cold wind. Human laughter drifted through the narrow streets, mixed with the clatter of dishes and the smell of roasted onions and wood smoke. Lucian drew his hood low and stepped into the noise, his cloak brushing the cobbles like a piece of midnight. He chose the Silver Lantern, the busiest inn on the square, its windows fogged with warmth. The moment he entered, dozens of mortal hearts beat louder, a hidden music beneath the talk. No one recognized him. To them, he was only another pale noble, perhaps a merchant, perhaps dangerous but not yet a name to fear. Inside, heat wrapped around him, scented with bread, soup, and brewing coffee. A fiddle played in the corner, clumsy but cheerful. Men argued about card games, women traded gossip, and someone was telling a bad joke about a chicken crossing the mountains. It was messy, loud, and alive. It was everything his perfect, silent throne room was not. "Table for one," a voice asked. She appeared at his elbow so quickly he almost didn't sense her approach. A young woman in a simple black dress and white apron, hair tied back in a ponytail, cheeks flushed from work. Her eyes met his directly, brown and steady, with only a flicker of unease when she saw how strange his were. "Yes," Lucian said. "Somewhere quiet if you have it." "We don't really do quiet," she replied, a trace of a smile touching her lips. "But I'll get you the closest thing we have." Her name, he heard someone call from the kitchen, was Alina. She led him to a small table near the back, where the lantern light was softer and the noise slightly muffled. As she set down a clay cup and filled it with dark, fragrant tea, Lucian studied her hands. They were roughened from hard work, knuckles red from the cold and hot water, but she moved with a careful grace, never spilling a drop. "Busy night," he observed. "Always is when the mines close early," she answered, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Miners drink more when they're afraid of losing their jobs." He watched her almost laugh at her own words and then stop herself, as if jokes cost more than she could afford. There was a tiredness in her shoulders that didn't match her young face. A kind of quiet bravery lived there instead. From upstairs, faint and muffled, came the sound of a baby crying. A few customers glanced up, annoyed. Alina's head snapped toward the ceiling, concern sharpening her features. The cry came again, thin and tired, more like a plea than a demand. "I'm sorry," she told Lucian, already stepping back. I'll be right back for your order." He nodded, but his attention had already shifted. Under the noisy surface of the inn, under the shuffle of boots and the clink of cups, he focused on the small sound above. His hearing, sharper than any human's, traced it like a thread. There was something strange in that cry, a rhythm he knew without knowing how. The baby's heartbeat. It was fast like any infant's, but the cadence was different, half familiar, half foreign. And under the soft, human scent was another trace, very faint, like a forgotten perfume on an old coat. Not human, not fully. Lucian stared at the wooden ceiling, every instinct suddenly alert. Upstairs, Alina hurried into the tiny attic room she rented from the innkeeper. The cold bit through the thin walls, but she had wrapped every crack with cloth, stacked straw around the edges of the crib, and lined it with all the blankets she owned. Still, the baby shivered. "Hush, Leo," she whispered, scooping the child into her arms. I know, the wind is angry tonight, isn't it?" The baby's skin was milk pale, almost translucent, his small hands curling and uncurling with effort. His eyes, when he opened them, were a strange, bright gold that made people whisper and look away. His body did not move like other babies. His legs lay softer, slower, as if each motion cost more strength than he had to give. But when he looked at Alina, something fierce and determined burned in that tiny face. "You're safe," she murmured, rocking him gently, pressing her cheek to his snowy hair. "I'm here. I promised your mother, remember? I keep my promises." Her words floated down through the floorboards like a prayer, brushing over Lucian's ears. He sat very still at his table below, tea untouched, breathing in the faint scent of the child and the woman who held him. "Promised your mother." His jaw tightened. Vampire. The realization slipped into him quietly but firmly, leaving no room for doubt. No human child had a heartbeat like that. No ordinary child carried that mix of warmth and cold, human and something else, woven together. And yet the baby's breath was shallow, his cry thin. He was not the fierce, unbreakable creature vampire children usually were from their first night. He was fragile, vulnerable. Lucian felt an anger rise in him, sharp and cold. What kind of vampire would abandon a child like that, hidden in an attic above a human inn, left in the arms of a mortal woman with nothing but thin blankets against a winter storm? What kind of coward refused to claim their own blood? Alina came back down, hair slightly mussed, apron crooked, but her eyes softer now. She took his order, apologized for the delay, laughed politely at a miner's joke, and moved between tables with the quick precision of someone who had learned to survive on tips and patience. Lucian watched the way she treated everyone the same: loud drunk, shy traveler, lonely widow, with a simple respect he had rarely seen even among nobles. He finished half his tea before the baby's cry sounded again, weaker this time. A draft slipped through the inn as the front door opened, and Alina flinched, looking up toward the ceiling with naked worry. "Bring him down," the innkeeper called gruffly from behind the bar. "The attic's freezing. You'll have me sued if he gets sick, girl." "He won't get sick," Alina protested, but her voice trembled. After a moment, she nodded. "Just for a while, then." Lucian's fingers tightened around his cup. Moments later, footsteps creaked on the stairs, and Alina appeared, cradling the baby wrapped in a black blanket. The room barely noticed. They were too busy with their own troubles. Only Lucian felt the air change, cool and heavy, as if the night had walked in again. He saw the tiny hand first, pale against the dark cloth. Then the curve of a small face, the shine of gold eyes blinking against the lantern light. The baby stared around as if the world hurt his senses, then turned his gaze, slowly, effortfully, straight toward Lucian's table. The world narrowed. Golden eyes met golden eyes. In an instant, memories he had buried deep ripped to the surface. Isolde in the moonlit garden, whispering, "If there's ever a child, promise me you'll let it live free." The letter that never reached him. The news of her death in a border skirmish. The quiet decision he'd made to feel nothing about it because feeling would shatter him. The same rare shade of gold. The same sharp, delicate nose. The same quiet fire that refused to bow, even in such a small, fragile face. Alina shifted nervously under his stare, pulling the baby closer. "He's not bothering you, is he, sir? He just hates being alone upstairs." Lucian didn't answer at first. He couldn't. For the first time in centuries, his chest felt too tight to speak. That scent, that blood, that impossible heartbeat. When he finally found his voice, it sounded different to his own ears, hoarser, almost human. "Where?" he asked quietly, eyes never leaving the child. "Did you get that baby?" Alina stiffened, instinctively stepping back as if to shield the boy. The baby whimpered softly, pressing his face into her shoulder. "He isn't a thing I got," she said, bravely but with a tremor. He's family." The word cut through Lucian like a blade he had forgotten he carried. He rose slowly from his chair, every movement measured, the room around them blurring into insignificance. "No," he whispered, more to himself than to her, as the truth crashed over him like icy water. He is not just family. The baby looked at him again, and something old and locked within Lucian's heart cracked open. That child, he breathed, each word a revelation and a wound, is mine. The lantern nearest them flickered. Somewhere outside, the wind howled down the street like a warning. Alina's fingers clenched around the baby's blanket, her eyes wide with fear and confusion, as the man she thought was only a strange noble suddenly stood before her not as a customer, but as the vampire king of Nocturne, claiming her fragile, golden-eyed child with a single, shattering sentence. The baby of two worlds. For a moment, no one moved. It felt as if the whole inn had forgotten how to breathe. The word king whispered through the room like a gust of wind. A card player dropped his hand of cards. The fiddle in the corner fell silent mid-note. Someone's mug hit the floor and rolled, spilling beer across the boards. One by one, faces turned toward Lucian, toward Alina, toward the small bundle in her arms with the burning gold eyes. Alina's throat worked as she swallowed. That's not funny, she managed, backing up a step. You can't just say things like that. Lucian lowered his hood, letting the lantern light fall fully on his pale face. The disguise of an ordinary traveler vanished. In its place stood the figure every child in Nocturne had heard stories about, the immortal ruler with winter in his gaze. Even without a crown, the air around him changed. The room seemed to tilt toward him, as if gravity itself remembered who held power here. A miner near the door dropped to his knees so quickly his chair toppled. "Your Majesty," he stammered, eyes wide. "We didn't know, we would never." Lucian barely heard him. His focus stayed on Alina and the baby who would not stop staring at him, as if drawn by some invisible thread. "I do not joke about blood," Lucian said quietly. "What is his name?" Alina's arms tightened around the child. "Leo," she replied, voice shaking. "His name is Leo, and he is my son." Those last words held no hesitation, no apology, only stubborn, tired love. Lucian felt something like respect stir inside him. "The king wants the boy," one of the customers whispered at another table. Alina heard it too, her eyes flashed. "He doesn't get to just want him," she shot back, surprising even herself with the sharpness in her tone. "You don't get to appear out of nowhere and claim a child you never once came to see." Her courage snapped a thin thread of tension. A few people gasped. The innkeeper's face went pale. You did not speak to the vampire king like that and live. Everyone knew it. Lucian's jaw tightened. He was not used to being confronted, certainly not by a young waitress with flour on her sleeve and fear in her eyes. His guards, who had followed him inside without anyone noticing, reached for their swords. He raised one hand without looking at them. They froze. "You think I knew about him?" Lucian asked, voice still calm, but edged with something raw. "You think I would leave my own child freezing in an attic over a tavern?" Alina swallowed. "I think kings forget the people they hurt," she said. "I think you have castles and servants and armies, and I think his mother died with only me to hold her hand." Silence rolled across the room like thunder. Lucian stared at her. "His mother," he repeated. There was only one name that word could mean. "Isolde." Alina nodded slowly. Her eyes softened, remembering. "She came here 1 year ago in the middle of a storm. Half frozen, half starved, carrying him in that same blanket. She never said she was important, only that people were hunting them and that she had to keep him hidden until he could be safely claimed." The baby whimpered as if reacting to the memory. Alina rocked him gently, her anger thinning into grief. "She told me his father's name just once," Alina went on. "Lucian. She begged me to send a letter to the castle if anything happened to her. She made me repeat your name so I wouldn't forget." Lucian's hands curled into fists at his sides. "I never received any letter." "I know," Alina whispered, "because she died 3 nights later, and no one came." The inn around them blurred. For an instant, Lucien was back in that moonlit garden centuries ago, Isolde laughing as she stole his cloak, daring him to chase her through roses and shadows. Human, brilliant, stubborn. The only one who had ever told him he could be better than his crown. Had she carried his child alone through winter roads, hunted and afraid, while he sat on a warm throne reading reports of grain and taxes? "Who took the letter?" he asked, voice low. Alina shook her head. "I gave it to a man who said he was riding to the capital. I don't know his name, just that he was afraid to even speak yours out loud." Fear, again, always fear. Fear of him, fear of his court, fear of getting involved in business that smelled like vampire blood. Lucien forced air into his lungs. "Why didn't you come to the castle yourself?" Alina almost laughed, a short, broken sound. A girl from a miner's family, walking up to the night palace with a strange baby and a story about a secret royal father. They would have thrown me in a dungeon or worse. People already whisper about Leo's eyes. They say he's cursed. I'm not stupid, Your Majesty. I kept him where I could protect him. Her words were simple, but they hit him harder than any sharpened stake. This human woman had risked everything for a child who wasn't even her blood, while he, who was that child's father, had done nothing at all because he had not known. Leo let out a small cough, struggling for breath. Instantly, Alina's anger broke, replaced by worry. She adjusted his blanket, rubbing gentle circles on his back. The baby's chest lifted unevenly, each inhale a tiny battle. "What is wrong with him?" Lucien asked, softer now. Alina hesitated, lowering her voice so only he could hear. "The healer says his legs are weak. His bones, they don't grow like other children's. Some nights he can barely move them. He gets tired quickly. And sometimes his heart beats too fast and then not fast enough, like it can't decide what he is. Half human, half vampire, entirely vulnerable." "He is not cursed," Lucien said firmly. "I know that," she answered, eyes hot. "But the others don't. If they knew what he really is, if they guessed he's part vampire, they would try to save the town from him, from us." As if to prove her point, the baby suddenly reached one small hand toward Lucien, fingers trembling. It was no royal gesture, just a simple, clumsy grab for the nearest interesting light, Lucien's amber pendant. Leo's pale fingers brushed the jewel, then closed around the edge of the king's cloak instead. Lucien froze. The touch was light as a snowflake, but it carried the weight of an entire unlived life. His son, his heir, his second chance and his greatest failure wrapped into one fragile body. Very slowly, almost afraid of his own hands, Lucien lifted the edge of the blanket. "May I?" he asked. Alina studied him for a long moment. The whole inn held its breath with her. Then, seeing something in his face that didn't match the stories, she nodded and shifted Leo into his arms. The baby was shockingly light. Lucien felt tiny ribs rise and fall against his palm, heard that strange, unsteady heart. Leo blinked up at him, amused by the change in height, and let out a soft noise that might have been the beginning of a laugh. Lucien had faced armies without flinching. He had held swords, scepters, treaties, the weight of a kingdom. None of it had made his hands shake the way they did now, holding one small life that had secretly belonged to him from the moment it began. "I was not there when you were born," he murmured to the child, so quietly only Alina could hear. "But I am here now." Leo reached for his face, patting at his chin, then accidentally poked his cheek. The king of Nocturne, conqueror of 3 realms, suffered a tiny, clumsy baby poke, and to the inn's stunned amazement, his mouth twitched into the smallest of smiles. The moment, fragile and unbelievable, lasted all of 5 heartbeats. Then the church bells began to ring. The sound crashed through the windows, sharp and urgent. Not the slow, steady toll of evening prayers, but the fast, panicked clamor reserved for fire or monsters. Shouts rose in the street outside. Boots thudded past the door. Someone yelled, "The demon child! Bring out the demon child!" Elena went white. "They saw him in the window," she whispered. "Someone must have seen his eyes." Fists pounded on the inn door. A man's voice, hoarse with fear and righteousness, shouted, "Open up! By order of the town priest, that creature must be surrendered, for the safety of us all." Leo startled and began to cry, a thin, frightened sound. The innkeeper backed away, wringing his hands. Several miners looked between Lucian and the door, torn between loyalty and terror. Lucian gently handed the baby back to Elena, his expression turning to iron. "Stay behind me," he said. The pounding on the door grew louder. Wood creaked under the blows. Someone outside started a chant, "Burn the demon, burn the demon," and others, uncertain but afraid, joined in. Elena clutched Leo against her chest, feeling his tiny heart race. As Lucian stepped toward the entrance, his cloak sweeping the floor like a gathering storm, she realized with a cold, shivering clarity that the next few minutes would decide everything. The door shuddered under another heavy impact, the bar across it straining. Lucian reached for the latch. And with a calm that did not match the chaos outside, the vampire king opened the door to face his own frightened subjects, with his secret child crying in the arms of a human woman behind him. The king before the torches. Cold night air rushed into the inn, carrying with it the sharp smell of smoke and wet wool. The square outside was crowded, villagers huddled together in a loose, uncertain circle, their faces lit by shaking torchlight. Snowflakes melted on angry foreheads and fearful eyes. At their front stood Father Merk, the town priest, his white hair plastered to his skull by the mist. He held up a wooden symbol of his faith in one hand, as if it were a shield. In the other, a bucket of water sloshed, reflecting fire and moonlight. "Step aside," the priest declared, voice cracking but loud. "There is a creature in your inn, innkeeper. I have seen its eyes through the window. The child is not human. The child is an omen." Lucian did not move from the doorway. "He is a child," the king said, his tone almost gentle. "That is enough." Merk squinted into the shadows of the inn, wary. He saw only a hooded figure at first, tall and still, face half in darkness. "Who are you to protect him?" the priest demanded. "Another servant of the night. I will not let this town fall to superstition and sorcery. We have lost too much already." "Elena," someone whispered behind Lucian. "Shut the door, girl, hide upstairs." But Elena stood frozen halfway down the hall, Leo clutched to her chest. The baby's cry had softened to small hiccups now, each one tugging at her heart like a hook. She could not run, and she could not step past the king to surrender him. She was trapped between the two. Lucian stepped forward, so the lantern behind him cast his face fully into the open. Gasps rippled through the crowd like a sudden wind. Knees hit the cobblestones. Torches dipped. The bucket in Merk's hand sloshed wildly as his arm trembled. Your Majesty," the priest stuttered, his certainty cracking. I did not know." "But you knew there was a child," Lucian replied, descending the steps slowly. Each footfall was measured, deliberate, like a judge walking toward a sentence. "And you called him demon." He stopped in the center of the square. The people of Brindleford knelt where they stood, some from habit, some from fear, a few from genuine loyalty. Lucian's guards fanned out behind him, hands on hilts but weapons still sheathed. Merk swallowed, gathering what was left of his courage. "With respect, my king, we have heard stories. Creatures born wrong, neither human nor vampire. They bring sickness, curses. They grow up to drink blood in the cradle. I have a duty to protect my flock." "And who," Lucian asked, his eyes shining gold in the torchlight, "protects the child?" The question hung in the frigid air. A woman in the crowd clutched her shawl tighter. "My niece died last spring," she whispered. "No cure could save her. Maybe the priest is right. Maybe. Maybe you are afraid, Lucian said, but his voice had softened. I do not blame you for that. Fear kept our two kinds apart for centuries. Fear built my castle walls and your church doors. He paused, glancing back through the open-in door. Elena met his eyes. Something passed between them, a brief, fragile exchange of trust. But listen well, he continued, turning back to his people. The child you call demon is my blood, my son. Shock broke the square's silence wide open. Exclamations, prayers, curses, all tangled together. Half human, someone breathed. A royal bastard, another muttered, more odd than cruel. Then a miner began, voice trailing off as the truth landed. He's the prince. Merk's face drained of color. My king, forgive me, I did not mean, had I known. Lucian cut him off with a small gesture. You did what you thought right with the knowledge you had. That is what leaders do. It is also how they make terrible mistakes. The priest flinched. Lucian let the words sink in, then raised his voice so that even those in the back could hear. My son is different. His body does not give him the strength others have. His blood runs with both moon and sunlight. He will struggle. He will fall. He will need help to stand again and again. He glanced toward the inn, where Elena now stood clearly in view, chin lifted despite the fear in her shaking hands. The first person to give him that help, he said, was not a vampire. It was a human girl with little more than an apron, a small room, and a very stubborn heart. Elena's eyes widened. The crowd slowly turned to stare at her as if seeing her for the first time. This woman, Lucian went on, fed him when she barely had bread for herself. She rocked him through fevers. She kept him alive when my court did not even know he existed. So tell me, Father Merk. He stepped closer, until the priest could see his own frightened reflection in the king's eyes. Who looks more like a monster to you? The child who has harmed no one, or the people willing to burn a baby they've never met? Merk's shoulders sagged under the weight of the question. The bucket in his hand tipped. Water spilled harmlessly onto the stones, hissing where it met stray embers. His fingers loosened around the wooden symbol. The square felt caught on the edge of a cliff. Years of stories about cruel vampires battled with the living proof of unexpected mercy standing before them. A young man near the back, the same boy who had attacked Lucian's carriage earlier that night, shoved his way forward. His wrist still ached from the king's careful grip, but his eyes were changed. Warier, wiser. My king, he said suddenly, dropping to one knee at Lucian's side. If that baby is your son, then he's our future. We were fools to come with torches. We should have come with blankets. A few people nodded. Shame crept into faces where anger had lived a moment before. One by one, torches lowered. Lucian looked around the circle of his people. Go home, he said softly. Hold your own children a little tighter tonight. And remember, the easiest thing in the world is to fear what is different. The harder, braver thing is to protect it. Slowly, the crowd began to disperse. Conversations started up in low, uncertain tones. Some glanced back over their shoulders, troubled but calmer. Merk remained where he was, breathing hard. Your Majesty, he said, if you wish, I will preach tomorrow about this child, about mercy. Lucian studied him. Preach about responsibility, he replied. Tell them that when a king fails his family, a village can choose to be better than he was. That a waitress in an attic knew more about love than her ruler. The admission tasted bitter and strangely clean. Humility pressed heavy on his tongue, but it did not break him. If anything, it made him stand straighter. He turned and walked back into the inn. Inside, the warmth wrapped around him again, but it felt different now, less like a place he was visiting, more like a place he had been summoned to. Elena watched him approach, her expression caught between gratitude and fury. You almost got yourself killed, she said quietly. talking to them like that, admitting he's yours. They would have discovered the truth eventually, Lucian replied. Better they hear it from me than from rumor. Elena shifted Leo, who had calmed but still clung to her apron with surprising strength. So what happens now? She asked. You take him away, put him in some gold crib in a stone room with nurses who don't know that he only sleeps if someone hums that silly song about the runaway goose. Lucian blinked. The what? She flushed. It's stupid, it rhymes badly, but he likes it. The corner of his mouth twitched again, almost a smile. I doubt my court knows many songs about runaway geese. Exactly, she said. They won't know him. He looked at Leo, at the child's thin, determined fingers still wrapped in her apron. The boy's eyelids drooped, heavy with exhaustion, but every time they closed, he forced them open again, fighting sleep like a tiny warrior afraid of missing the next battle. We have healers at the palace, Lucian said slowly. Scholars who study rare conditions, magic older than your church's stone.